by China.
Today, the United States is the #1 consumer of energy in the world, but the estimates that we're seeing now is that China will surpass the United States within the next 2 or 3 years. The more that China grows, the bigger their economy becomes, and that's a threat to our position in terms of market share and our ability to produce in this country. So it does have an impact, but energy is directly related to how fast your economy is growing. If you're not using energy, then you don't have an economy. You're not producing anything. We do consume a lot of energy, but we also provide and produce a lot of things that go into the world economy and produce for our own people here at home.
Although it imports 2/3 of its oil needs, the United States remains the world's 3rd largest producer of crude oil, just behind Saudi Arabia and Russia. Most of this domestic oil is produced by small independent producers who account for 90% of drilling in the United States. Kern County, California, is one of the oldest oil-producing regions in America. Like his father and his grandfather before him, Chris Hall is an independent producer in Kern County.
My father took it over from him after World War II, and I took over the reins of the company in about 1982. Things were great until 1986 when prices collapsed, and for about 15 years we lived hand to mouth and just barely made it, but we're here today, and we're optimistic that there's another future, more future for us here for another 20, 30, 40 years.
With the rise in oil prices, independent producers are enjoying a new prosperity. They have gone back to wells left untouched since oil prices fell. Today, the Bakersfield region supplies 10% of U.S. production. 85% of the country's wells are concentrated here, in one of the cradles of the U.S. oil industry.
What's really unique about this producing facility here is we've kept a lot of the old tools and machinery in place that was being used back in the early 1900s when this field was first found. And it brings back to us sort of the roots of where the oil industry was found, where the current methods of producing oil were developed, and they're in application around the world today. The one thing that we are very much aware of, and had been predicted, was that the increase in consumption by China was what brought the supply and demand into balance and yes, caused prices to go up. If it hadn't been for higher prices, we would have been out of business. As an independent producer in the U.S., I don't see the Chinese producer as a competitor. I'm more focused on our local market and what we were doing. If he were producing in a field next door, if they'd bought Unocal, then I would see them more as maybe as a competitor. But right now, I don't see that.
2005 was a turning point in the battle for oil. China's need was so desperate that it tried to set up as a major oil supplier itself. It tried to take over Unocal, one of the leading companies in the U.S. oil industry. The bid came from CNOOC, the China National Offshore Oil Corporation. China was embracing the rules of international finance to launch a bold incursion into the U.S. domestic market. There was an immediate outcry from U.S. legislators who saw the bid as a serious threat to the nation's vital interests.
Mr. Chairman, we are dealing here not in any reasonable sense with a takeover attempt by one corporation of another. We are dealing with a takeover attempt by the most powerful communist dictatorship in the world, attempting to take over an American corporation.
Congress was in the middle of writing an energy bill that was trying to focus on creating more domestic energy, having greater control over our own future. And in the middle of actually writing that bill, we heard, and it heard in the papers, and it began to come across on the wires that the Chinese National Offshore Oil Company had placed a bid for a major U.S. oil producer. And obviously, when it comes to controlling our own future, having a Chinese-owned company take over one of our major producers was a threat to us. And the more we looked at it, we began to realize that certain technology that was owned by Unocal, that dealt with deep water drilling, that dealt with sonar testing, a lot of the things that had dual use, things that could be used in oil and gas production but also had a military component to it, those technologies were owned by Unocal.
After days and nights of hearings in Congress, the Chinese were forced to abandon their bid.
The problem was that it came at a time that there was already a very strong suspicion about China's expansion.